Roy Schuster, really good to connect today. How are you?
Very good. Nice to be here, Martin.
Nice to have you. Well, look, for the benefit of the audience, would love it if we could just start with a bit of an intro on yourself, your background, your career in the world of value engineering, and
hmm
anything else you feel is interesting for the general audience.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Yeah, I'm currently in a position as running the value program for Infoblox, which is a networking security cloud management suite with a variety of products within our solutions. So I have a small team that works on building value models, building and maintaining our self-service tool for our sellers. We have a sales force of about 200 people that we support today, and we're just kind of building this out. It's sort of an experiment within the company. It started about a year and a half ago, and I joined back in April of 2024. My background prior to the current job with Infoblox, I've worked for a variety of companies. Worked most recently with a company called Tanium, which does endpoint management and security. Built the value program there. Prior to that, I was spent a long time with Cisco Systems and in a variety of roles there, and some consulting roles early in my career, where basically everything I've done, probably in the past 25 years, has had something to do with the kind of recurring theme intersection of technology and business value, and helping organizations understand how the different technologies they apply, both hardware, software, solution sets, platforms, et cetera, can bring business value to their business customers, internal and external. So that's been sort of the theme throughout, and really happy to be doing this today in a company like Infoblox, which has a strong belief in the business value of technology solutions for our customers.
And I love how you mentioned that it's kind of an experiment. It's almost like they're trialing out how does business value engineering operate within the structure within so yeah, if you I would love to learn more about that concept of experimenting and learning.
Yeah, about a year before I joined the company, there was feedback from various parts of the sales organization that this was an area that we need to get better at. We have a very technical IT focused solutions, but we were struggling in some ways to have value conversations, business conversations with more senior executives, et cetera, and also to frankly create budget for our product where maybe it doesn't exist. There may be, organizations that just don't have anything in this space that where we play today. So basically, prior to me joining, the company experimented with buying a tool, implementing a tool, doing some enablement of the sales force to be able to build value models, et cetera, on a kind of a self-service basis. And then basically had some great results out of that, and wanted to expand the program and sort of do it in a more formal manner, a lot like some of our competitors and generally organizations in the SaaS space are doing today, which is a pretty common approach. So we were playing a little bit of catch up, and I think we've caught up, and now we're sort of trying to take the program to the next level, and that involves not only better tools and models, but also consultative methods where we can support our sellers and improve their ability to do value selling, and also improve their ability to make those types of value-based arguments around cost and efficiency and risk with our customers.
It's a really interesting use case that you mentioned where, and I hadn't thought of it this way, where an organization like Infoblox, but any that is bringing in a business value engineer or that business value, the value practice in, almost applying a very specific use case, which is what you mentioned. And correct me if I misinterpreted, but imagine saying we want to go after a new segment for who don't have budget for our category of service. And so
Correct.
business value, it's almost like you're a team whose focus is on it's almost a market expansion, if I'm kind of reading it accurately. It's really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I think we're a little bit of a unique company in that we have a niche which is maybe not acknowledged as a necessary item in everybody's IT budget, right?
Story of
So
my
we
life,
we
my previous business.
yeah, exactly. So we focus on what we call DDI, which is DNS, DHCP, and IP address management, kind of an acronym of acronyms. And, it's an area that companies have traditionally, sort of done on an ad hoc basis manually, or they use some default tools from Microsoft. So they don't see it necessarily as a budget line item or a space that they have to be in. There's not a Gartner Magic Quadrant for it where the various competitors are,
Right.
kind of positioned off. So we have to both kind of create the urgency and the need around that product and then demonstrate that, a dollar invested in our product returns, $2 or $3 or whatever the ratio might be. So we're kind of I think it's kind of interesting because we're not in a space where we're, frequently in a bake off with multiple competitors, all of whom do sort of the same thing. We're sort of unique in that way, but we have this challenge of creating budget, which, our CEO talks about quite a bit in terms of, internally to our organization is we're going out and talking to prospects who we're kind of new to them, and we're forcing them to consider something that it's an additive to their overall budget. It's a new line item, which really makes the business justification and the value assessment really, really important in that case.
And would you consider, I guess, budget establishment on the buyer side a typical
Mhm.
role for business value, or is this unique? Is this a new type of activity that you've applied value to?
Yeah, for in what I've done, it's kind of unique. I mean, I think there was a little bit of this earlier in my career. One of the organizations that I worked for did customer relationship management, CRM software, and that, it's quite a while ago. And it was in the days where not every company had kind of adopted that
Sure.
strategy, that CRM was a space that you needed to have a software solution. And so, we worked with a number of different partners in that space, like Siebel, for example. And in those days, you were frequently going to customers with the technology partner and saying, this is something you need to do. You need to get more intimate with your customers. You need to manage their data better, et cetera. So we were creating market. Now, in my days with Cisco, for example, everybody was a customer, right? So
Right.
our products were ubiquitous in a lot of ways. Now, we did have opportunities to say, we're doing new things, video collaboration, IP telephony, some of the things that we did in IoT, for example, were new. So those were areas where we were creating budget. But a lot of times we were talking about things like refreshing a network, which everybody had gone through multiple cycles of before. So now we're trying to make a value case around what are we doing in the next round? What's better than the last version of the product as you refresh to try to drive that momentum towards updating the technology that they had invested so much money in.
And I think that use case, the budget creation, is a really good indicator of how, because we often get asked, what is the difference between a business value professional and a solutions architect or a sales engineer? There's inevitably some overlap in certain activities, but there are considerable differences. Yeah, I'd love your perspective on those differences.
One of the things that I say kind of frequently to our sellers, and this across a lot of organizations that I've been in, if you can get a technical champion on your side who is working with the solution architect, for example, to see, experience, get hands-on with a product that the champion then begins to see like this is transformative. It can improve the way I do my work. It can make much more improve the efficiency of the day-to-day work. It can also help me in a crisis to respond to an incident or a breach or whatever that may be. So that champion who's more technical than business starts to see this product is really good and I want to bring it into my environment. They frequently hit a wall though when they say to themselves, how do I get this justified? How do I get the budget approved within my organization? So it's a two-part equation where we have to make a convincing argument that the product solves business problems, but then we have to be able to say that it can do it cost effectively. And that technical champion 99 times out of 100 really struggles to do that part of it and build that value case. So if I can pair with a solution architect who is getting the customer excited about the product and the features and capabilities, and then show them a roadmap forward where this can be done in a cost-effective manner, and that they can take that up the chain in their organization to their approver, economic buyer, if you want to use that term, to then justify the purchase. That's a winning strategy to sell your product, right? Those two things, and that is a pairing of the value engineer and the solution architect that when it works well, that's kind of where the magic happens.
And so what is the ideal profile of that value engineer? What kind of skill sets do you look for when you hire somebody for that role?
Right. I think there's sort of kind of check the box capabilities in the profile of a person that, they
Sure.
have to have some financial analysis skills. Having somebody who is in the leaderboard or top tier of Excel users is obviously important. But I really want people who are curious about asking customers about business problems
Hmm.
and like to ask maybe some of the tougher follow-up questions that lead to quantification. And those can be areas of pain today, areas of risk that occur when adverse events happen in the environment, et cetera. And maybe persistently and curiously following up to ask those questions so that we can get at underlying numbers. Baseline metrics. One of my colleagues refers to it as kind of an anchor metric that we can determine the potential value off of. So that interviewing and kind of curiosity piece of it is as important, maybe more important than sort of the mechanical skills at manipulating models and putting together, spreadsheets and
Totally.
presentations with lots of pretty pie charts and things like that.
That's a pretty innate skill set. I mean, you either have it or you don't. The
Yep.
natural social skills, being interpersonal relation skills, getting somebody to really open up and trust and engage and in a conversation with you, but equally also having somebody who has a natural curiosity to dive deeper into numbers
Yep.
and know where to go next, right?
Right, exactly. And also, the empathy that you need sometimes when the person that you're talking to struggles to get the numbers or answer the question. A technique in that manner is really to start to say, give them a data point and say, do you think it's more or less than that in your organization, or how much more or less? And sort of get them to it. And if they have the ability to throw out a data point, which we know is reasonable and believable, based on other customers that we've worked with, then the customer or the prospect can react to that and say, no, I think we're a little higher or lower than that number. And that's a way to get at an estimate from the customer. And we're always looking to get, either customer or partner feedback on metrics such that the things that we're sourcing in the models that we build don't come from us. It's not our opinion, it's theirs. And that starts to create the collaboration and ownership of the models and the value proposition by the customer, which is critical to moving these things forward in that they're engaged and own it.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Now,
Mhm.
the other thing that I find quite interesting is that within this world of value or value practice, there aren't all that many companies from a volume perspective that actually have this practice. And what's interesting is that probably a small number of categories where the bulk number of value engineers exist, right? Or are,
Mhm.
cloud security, infrastructure, data. What is it about those sectors or those areas within tech that require this level of assessment, of analysis, of selling that maybe some of the more traditional SaaS don't? Or maybe are they just more mature and sophisticated? I'd love your perspective on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think maybe to your first point, I think I'm in a couple of communities of people in this field, if you will, right? And I think it's growing in numbers and intensity in
Totally.
terms of, and it's becoming more de facto in the SaaS space. And I'd also differentiate, when you talk about companies that very much IT focused products, it's a little bit of a more of a groundbreaking activity in those areas, right? The companies that have sold business applications, when you look at a Salesforce or an SAP, those types of companies, an Oracle in terms of their applications, they've done this for a long time. And interesting thing there is that they are selling directly to business customers. Like the purchasing power for an application lies in the business, not within IT. So our product and then some of the cloud products that are out there, if they're strictly IT focused, networking and security products, et cetera, we're starting with an IT buyer, and that IT buyer may struggle to make the business argument. So that's kind of more of a two-step process. They want to manage and secure their environment in a in the most cost effective manner, and they have to make that argument to their internal business customer. So we're kind of helping them with that part, that part of the process where it's a little more direct when you're talking about, SaaS business applications like a Salesforce, for example.
It's really
So
interesting.
it's evolved over time. I feel like if you just kind of scan who's hiring in this area, you'll see more and more activity in different levels. And actually, the interesting thing that I always find too is where does it sit in the organization? Sometimes it's in the same group with a solution architect or SE type function. Sometimes it's directly, as part of the sales team. Other organizations will look at it as a role that's compensated based on winning deals as opposed to being more of a staff function. So I think that there's a bit of an evolution and a shakeout in the industry on where does this thing fit and what does it, where does it, how does it execute, which is very similar, I think, in some ways to what happened in the last decade with customer success and customer experience type roles that were sort of everybody had to build this function. Organizations had different levels of success with it. Some of them
Totally.
have pulled back that strategy, and some of them have done well and expanded and invested more.
And you've seen a lot of experimentation with CS, for instance. Do they handle renewals? Do they handle expansion? Does that go back into the sales function? Nobody's really, well, people have cracked it, but there isn't a standard best practice yet. A lot of the time, it can also be dependent on the actual organization.
Right, exactly. There's not one good way to do it. There's many
Yes,
different ways. There's lots of ways that have shown to be, less successful
for
in
sure.
doing, resulted in retraction in that space, right? And I think we're seeing a little bit of the same thing for, the value space also.
And from your experience, where have you seen it work the best? As part of pre-sales, as part of embedded into the actual sales process?
Yeah, I mean, I think doing it in the pre-sales world is table stakes for every organization. I think the most difficult part and a holy grail in the industry for us is really converting that into a full life cycle view of value.
Yeah,
So if I can get you excited about a product and put a model or a value proposition in front of you which says that motive or makes you motivated to buy, now I really do have an obligation to help you track and manage that value going forward and optimize it, work on value realization. I don't want to drop the ball there, but it's a very difficult space. And then you have to think about how do I do that in a mechanized way as opposed to bringing on an army of customer success managers to support accounts. And if your accounts are smaller in size, it's hard to do that in an affordable way, right? One of the things we're trying to look at now, which I think will be really important, is demonstrating value post sale,
yes,
using telemetry, using metrics and data from the product. And nirvana, I think in the industry is if you have a product that demonstrates its own value or reports on its own
sure.
value, then it should be obvious how that drives expansion, drives renewals, and so forth.
Yeah, so you can imagine business intelligence tools being really important in being able to connect that information into your whatever models you built in.
Yeah, showing a dashboard, showing metrics that are live, even producing reports that show, where did we make improvements once we started using the product, whatever the product might be. When I was at Cisco, we built dashboards that were really custom for particular customers, which we could afford to do because some of the accounts were $100 million
Of
accounts,
course.
in which we could invest some money in a dashboard that creates intimacy and stickiness with that particular customer because we were selling to them on such a big scale. In fact, some of the customers that we worked with liked that approach so much that they asked for customizations to
Of
those
course.
those dashboards. And in fact, they were willing to pay for that because, we were their infrastructure partner. We were going to help them manage, a large global network, and we were giving them, the type of dashboard that a CIO or the head of networking would have on his or her desktop and use that as the way that they were monitoring what was going on, number of tickets opened, outages, uptime, etc. And that was extremely valuable to
Of
them.
course.
So it was we were providing on a customized basis for them, and it was a lot of really really created that kind of stickiness in the account, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. Stickiness, expansion opportunities. I can imagine everything. It's interesting because, as I'm sure you know, we're an intelligent business case platform. My company, Simbi. we very much focus on the business case as the sales process, right? Using it from the very beginning as a part of a value hypothesis, using it to invite discovery and all that. But we're also seeing and building towards that for the very reason that you just mentioned. The business case, even at the point of signature, is still a hypothesis, right? Only when the rubber meets the road, when you actually start to execute, can you
Got
actually
it. Yeah.
measure true performance. And so that value realization piece, that value delivery that you just mentioned, is top on everybody's mind because it, like you said, the holy grail, right? You need to be able to capture information to be able to demonstrate how you're doing versus the original business case and what you need to do to course correct if things start to go in a slightly different direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's I was at a conference probably about a little over a year ago where this was 90% of the discussion
I
among
can
people
imagine.
kind of in the session. And everybody, men and women in the audience, everyone struggled with it. Every organization was challenged. Everyone had done a little bit that we could kind of talk about as sort of, here's a strategy that has some value to us as an organization, and we've been able to increase retention or help in driving a specific renewal. But doing it on a systematic basis, again, without an army of people, can be really challenging.
And I think there's a couple of challenges there. There's only so far that your own company's telemetry could go because a lot of those
Mhm.
outcomes aren't within your own data sets. They're within your
Right.
customers. And so
Hmm.
it requires them to be able to partner in that tracking and share, there's inevitably every company will be different. They may have to do things manually. And so how do you get them on board to be as strict in managing and as diligent in managing the outcomes as you want to be?
Right, and it's exacerbated by the fact that in a lot of organizations, we work with other companies that I've been at or have worked with, that the audience and the cast of characters on the customer side changes, and
Totally.
suddenly the individual who approved the original business case doesn't work there anymore. They've moved a certain function to another department. Nobody really knows the original metrics, et cetera. So trying to do that on an ongoing basis
Mm.
is extremely challenging, right? I think, in the past, I've worked with a lot of organizations that, used, managed services or outsourcing where they're trying to buy the outcome. And that was one way to go about it from the perspective of I'm going to implement a new product, I'm going to change my process, and then I'm going to outsource that. And they're going to put SLAs in place that are going to guarantee me an outcome, right? And I think that had sort of a glory period where that was the approach to doing this. So if I want value, I'm going to
Mm.
contract for it. I'm going to put it in an SLA, and I'm going to see how that works. Some of those agreements had some value and improved things. A lot of them ended up being, entrenched in negotiation and bickering over the values of the SLAs and so
Sure.
forth, right? But that was an attempt, I think, in the industry, 10, 20 years ago to try to figure out how you lock in the value that you're projecting, contract for it.
Yeah, and there's never going to be, at least not for the foreseeable future, a perfect way to manage that with so many different types of companies. And
Yep.
so earlier in the conversation, we talked a little bit about the current role that you're engaged
Yep.
in with this kind of I wouldn't say experiment, but this approach of building budget and generating budget.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it must be in an area where there's a lot of status quo challenges, right? And what I mean
Mm.
by that is we see a lot of the companies that we work with, the biggest competitor that they have isn't another company, it's indecision, it's status quo, right? I think something like
Yep.
60% of deals today are lost due to indecision. That's probably the most painful part of a
Yep.
pipeline, right? Because that's indecision means that you've gone quite far down the path and invested a lot of resource.
I think that's very much the case with us. And, I sometimes call it inertia. And just, it's
So
easier to
many words
just
for
keep doing
it.
what you're doing. We find that, and here's something that, in lieu of that, sometimes we win business because of something going wrong. There
Yeah,
is a breach or there is, some major difficulty that prompts a prospective customer that maybe we've been talking to for multiple years who never purchased to then call us and say, okay, yeah, I guess I really do need your product. So that can win you some business, but it's not really the best way to enter
Yeah.
into a business relationship based on a crisis, right? So you want to be more proactive about that. And that's, that's really the capability that you want to be able to put forward is, have people interested in the value that you can provide, not because something bad happened, but because they're looking forward into the future and they're saying that I'm going to need this and it's a better way of thinking about solving the problem than maybe we have been. Also, we currently work in an environment where some of the things that we do can be done maybe not as well, but can be done in some manner with free tools from a large vendor like Microsoft, for example. And that's an approach companies can take. In the meantime, they're inefficient. In the meantime, they're causing a lot of unforced errors, et cetera, in their environment, and they're just living with it. And at the lower levels in the organization, people are just dealing with it, maybe not realizing that they can, that there might be a better way. So I think that's also part of it in that default or good enough type capability is the default for a lot of organizations, and that's unfortunate. And it's our job to convince them there's a better way to do it, and it's worth the investment to move up a level in terms of handling processes and managing the complexity in your environment.
How much of that indecision do you think is a psychological state of mind?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd almost want to probe some of our sellers to answer that
Yeah.
better. I I think that's certainly, every study on people resisting change in organizations it shows the same result is that,
Nobody likes it.
that nobody likes it, right? Right. So I think that's the case, obviously,
Yeah.
case by case basis, or I think I like the situations where you do see a buyer, a champion, for example, who does want to change, who does want to do something different, but they struggle with getting budget. Just something
Yeah,
simple like allocating the budget for it. If we can help them with that, they're very happy, and we've made them a hero in their organization, and that's
for
that's
sure.
always a good thing.
As John McMahon always says, right? The best way to address buyer risk, that final stage in the buying process, is with a compelling business case and a convincing implementation plan, right?
Obviously, yeah, yeah, and that second part of it is really important to be able to tell an organization, here's how we're going to go forward once you purchase, and here's a very logical way to do that that's going to increase your chances of success by a great deal, whether that's professional services that we could deliver, whether it's working one of our partners, et cetera. It's really, really important and maybe sometimes underlooked in the industry just from the perspective of, I've told you how to get that value, just go ahead and do it. No, I want to help you and make sure I hand hold you throughout that process to make sure that it does happen.
And then internally, the role of value engineering is quite a partnership role, right? It is a team sport. Have you seen a lot of differences in how sales teams engage or their receptiveness to engaging with value engineering, either resistance or embracing?
Yeah, I think every organization has a spectrum on that, in that there are very good professional sellers out there who hit their quotas and, meet their performance objectives quarter to quarter without doing this, right? And they're the hardest ones to
Of course,
convince.
if it ain't broke.
Okay, that's right. They may be looking at it from the perspective of, I'm a relationship seller. I learn about people's problems and they trust me so that I can convince them that the product that I sell, will help them solve that problem. Do I need to quantify it? Only on last resort, maybe if the procurement person gets involved and requests it, then I'll do it. Otherwise, I'm going to sell like I have for many, many years, right? I think some of our, newer sellers, younger sellers to some degree are maybe a little more open to the approach. And then once, just kind of opening that crack in the window, then it's a question of what level of support do we provide for them, right? We've decided to give every seller access to a value platform that they can use to build business cases and models and so forth, right? Some of them use it on every opportunity. Some of them rarely use it. That's okay. You're always going to see that level of range. That's great. That's kind of a self-service model. But then above that, we can do a couple of different things. One is we can give them a sort of a medium touch level of support to help them build the business case and help them learn how to do that such that, the next one and the next one, they get more proficient at it. And then there's the top level of support, which is basically, I'm going to act as a consultant with you. You're going to bring me in and introduce me to the customer. I'm going to have some level of independence from the commission salesperson to say, I'm here to help and calculate the numbers. I'll even meet with the customer individually without the salesperson in the room to gather information and iterate on a model. And that's a more expensive model, but in high priority deals, large deals, strategic deals, et cetera, that's the level of support you need to have. That takes some people to do it, but it also, I think, is important for for those strategic opportunities to be able to dive in and do whatever's necessary, right? To, we're here to close the deal. Let's do it in a team approach. Often that's also partnering myself with, kind of the commercial finance part of our business, like our deals desk, to be creative about ways we can structure a transaction. Those two things together can be pretty powerful on the business side and the commercial side.
Yeah, and I can also imagine that the nature of the sales. So if you have a more complex sale and you're on the discovery side, you may have a buyer that maybe is a bit cagey, and maybe because they may not gel well with a salesperson for that very reason. They know a salesperson, they're working on commission, they've got a very specific incentive. Whereas your role while you're working for that company is more neutral. It is really about to make sure that they're
Right.
getting the most value. So maybe they'll be a bit more collaborative and open with their sharing.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Obviously, I want to see the deal close too, but I can at least position myself as, I'm here as a consultant. One of the things that I bring to the table is I've been in the room and had these discussions with lots of different customers that are experiencing similar levels of pain. I can tell you how they viewed it, how they estimated or quantified the value that we can bring and so forth. So it's a best practice. It's a free service that we provide. It's consultative. Hopefully, in that back and forth, the customer's getting some value out of it other than just accelerating the transaction. We want them to be learning about it. Maybe we can bring some ideas to the table or use cases that specific other customers have seen in the product that might be beneficial to them. So there's a lot of things that we can do that are more of a value add other than just, kind of, sales enhancement or sales acceleration.
Yeah, it's buyer enablement, right? Because a lot of the time your buyer may be the very first time your champion has ever bought your category,
Yep.
right? So it's helping them to buy better and buy more intelligently.
And I'll mention when during my time at Cisco, we did a lot of this work. I did a lot of this work and my team did a lot of this work, but we were actually where we resided in the organization was in the professional services team.
Right.
So what we would do is for large customers, especially, we would work on kind of a strategy and roadmap approach, which included a business case upfront on a pro bono basis to start the thing off. Then we would, drive that into products and services. And then the logical outgrowth that would be my team doing on a paid basis a program management office, which was designed to make sure the project delivered on time. We executed all the key steps and we ensured the value, et cetera. That was a paid service. But it was, in some areas we even refer to it as a value assurance
Sure.
type of service. And you can do that in a larger context. A very large global company may want to do something like that. We did that in some of the largest manufacturers and banks around the world.
Makes sense. So, a couple of final questions for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
We
Yeah,
like to ask this of every guest that we have. So the first one
yeah.
is, speaking of value engineering, who are the best or is the best value engineer you've ever worked with? Could be a mentor, could be a peer.
Yeah, well, I've had a couple of people that have worked with me at multiple jobs. One of them is a gentleman named Gayo Desai, who worked with me both at Cisco and my prior company, Tanium. He is currently at Palo Alto Networks. He's been one of the best. He was a good partner and sometimes a sparring partner in terms of what should or should not go into a model. He
Yep.
always brought an opinion to the table, but I really liked working with him over the years. And, somebody that you hire multiple times is somebody that you probably have that level of confidence in. I'm hoping maybe before I'm done in my life and retired that we'll work together at least one more time. But he's a fantastic value engineer, one of the best I've ever seen.
It's always great to have a sparring partner with
Yep.
mutual respect.
Yep.
And then on the other side, within sales teams, who are some of the best sales reps that you've worked with that really got value engineering that with whom you collaborated well?
There've been a lot. When I in my Cisco days, they for the larger accounts they had a role called client director, which was really a senior account leader who had multiple account managers working for them on different functional areas. One of the gentlemen that I worked with quite closely was a guy named Dennis Thomason, and he's gone on to a lot of other things since then. But for three or four, critical accounts in the Cisco space, like Caterpillar, State Farm Insurance. He was the client director for those and managed a team, deriving value in those. And Dennis had sort of the foresight to invest in the planning process, knowing that I'm not just trying to look at the next quarter, the next fiscal year. I'm looking to build a 3 or 4 year plan with this customer, and that included defining initiatives and projects and attaching a value proposition to each one of them, such that we were really providing that customer with a lot of value add in addition to just selling to them. We were giving them a roadmap for using our products, for professional services, for all the different things that we could do. And it made us, as I mentioned, stickiness is a great word, but it made us a sticky and a trusted business partner that where we could provide services and value and products in a number of different ways over time. And there was really no question that we were going to continue to do that going forward in the future. So Dennis really was visionary in that and was willing to make that investment and not rush the transactions and get to the table, with that sort of measured approach. And we really, really liked working with him. My team did a number of projects with him over the years, and it was always a great experience.
Amazing. Roy, thank you so much. Really enjoyed today's
Yeah.
session.
Martin, thank you so much, and I appreciate your time and being able to share some of my views. And love to network with people who are listening today and interested in any of these topics.
Yeah, it's a great community out there. Really great.
Very good.
Thanks, Roy.
Okay. Thank you.